I'm Eleanor Marshall. I'm 74 years old, and this morning I threw my son's wife out of my house. Yes, my house. Yesterday was my birthday, but I wasn't even home to celebrate it. I was in the hospital overnight, nothing serious, just a heart check. When I came back this morning, I found the cake in the trash, the decorations torn, and her voice echoing through the hall. Why is she still alive? They said if I opened my mouth, I'd never see my grandson again. So I didn't. I opened my lawyer's number instead. And the next thing, even the neighbors watched. The morning after they laughed, I woke before the sun. My body always knows when something's off. The ache in my knees, the stiffness in my fingers. But that day it wasn't just age pressing down on me. It was something colder, heavier. I shuffled into the kitchen like I always do. Reached for my favorite mug, the chipped one with daisies painted on it, the one George gave me for our 25th anniversary. The cupboard door squeaked like it always had. A soft little whimper that told me I was still in my house, still in my rhythm. The kettle whistled low and slow. I poured the water, dropped in the tea bag, and waited. The scent of early morning jasmine drifted in through the open window. Still something felt wrong. The steam curled, then died too quickly. I sat down at the breakfast table. The chair creaked beneath me, not in protest, but like it was remembering me. The seat across from me? Empty as always. George's chair hadn't moved in 8 years. I used to put fresh flowers there every Sunday. Lately, I just stopped. Maybe because I felt like no one was bringing me flowers either. The tea sat untouched. I kept staring at it, watching it go cold. It mirrored me more than I liked to admit. Then my eyes landed on the birthday card. Still sealed. Lying flat on the table like an afterthought. No handwriting on the front. No to Mom or happy birthday. Just the store's shiny envelope. As if someone grabbed it on the way home, tossed it down, and forgot I was still someone worth celebrating. I hadn't opened it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I already knew what wasn't inside. I stood up slowly, my slippers brushing against something underfoot. A ribbon, crushed, damp, the kind you tie on gift boxes. I picked it up, rubbed it between my fingers. It was soggy. I turned to the window. The sky was still gray from last night's rain. The garden was soaked. The roses George had planted were bent over, like they couldn't carry their own weight anymore. That's when I noticed the front gate was open. My heart gave a small thump. Not fear, not yet. Just that ripple of something not right. I went to close it, and that's when I saw it. Sitting by the garbage bin. Drooping. Ruined. The birthday cake. White frosting, purple piping. My favorite. Coconut. It was in the trash. Still in the box. Untouched. Rainwater had pooled around the edges. The paper napkins were torn, strewn across the driveway like confetti no one cared to clean. I stood there in my nightgown, hand on the gate, looking down at that ruined cake as if it were a body. I didn't remember much after that. Just that my hand started trembling and I had to sit down on the porch bench. The wood was damp, soaked through my robe. I didn't care. Across the street, old Mrs. Langston peeked through her curtains. She saw me. I know she did. But she didn't wave. She just pulled the curtain back down. Like I was a ghost she didn't want to admit seeing. I finally got up, went back inside. The house was quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet where something had already happened. Where the laughter from last night still echoed in the walls. As if the house remembered what I wasn't supposed to hear. I stepped into the living room. That's when the true weight hit me. My recliner gone. My books? Stuffed haphazardly into cardboard boxes by the fireplace. The curtains? Replaced. Beige and new. Soulless. No one had asked me. No one had even told me. I walked over to the mantel where George's picture always sat. The frame was pushed behind a cheap scented candle, apple cinnamon. Not mine. His picture had dust on it. Dust. In my own house. I picked it up, brushed it gently. Held it to my chest. I'm still here, George, I whispered. They think I'm fading, but I'm still here. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from David. Just 3 words. Hope you're okay. No happy birthday, Mom. No call. No check-in from the hospital visit. Just a vague, guilty pat on the shoulder. I didn't reply. I just stared at that cold, untouched tea. And finally, I poured it down the sink. Not out of anger, just to make room for something warmer. Something I wasn't sure would ever come. And then I noticed, my house keys weren't where I'd left them. It started with the furniture. At first I thought maybe the cleaners had moved it while I was gone. But no, cleaners never came anymore. That was a cost-saving decision David and Emily made after they moved in. "We'll handle the chores," Emily had said, her smile tight like it hurt her to say it. But I hadn't asked anyone to move the furniture. And yet, when I walked into the living room that morning, my recliner was gone. The one with the deep cushion that held the shape of my body, the one George bought me when I came home from surgery, gone. In its place was a sleek, gray velvet thing. Too small, too modern, and completely unfamiliar. It looked like something from a hotel lobby. My breath caught. Not from fear, just confusion. I looked around. My floral pillows? Nowhere. The hand-stitched throw from my sister? Folded and shoved beneath the coffee table like clutter. I turned slowly. Even the rug had changed. The soft, faded lavender one I'd chosen with George was rolled up and replaced with a cream geometric pattern. Sharp lines. Cold. Like her. The scent in the air was different too. Not the warm hint of old books and lemon polish I loved. No. This was synthetic, something perfumed and fake. Probably one of those sprays Emily buys in bulk. I made my way to the mantel. George's photo wasn't there. Panic bloomed in my chest. For a moment I truly forgot how to breathe. Then I saw it. Face down on the hallway console, behind a stack of unopened Amazon boxes. The frame had a small chip in the corner. I picked it up gently, brushing off the dust. That photo had survived 32 years, 2 moves, a house flood, and raising a boy. And now it was tossed aside like a free catalog. Footsteps behind me. "Morning." Emily's voice rang out, chipper and hollow. "Oh, did you see the changes?" I turned. She was in one of her robes, silk and shiny, coffee in hand. Not the kind you drink. The kind you flaunt. "What happened to the recliner?" I asked, my voice soft but steady. She tilted her head, smiling like I was being silly. "Oh, that old thing? It was falling apart. We figured it was time for an upgrade." "We." "Not you." "Not I." "We." I blinked. "You didn't ask." She shrugged, took a sip. "Didn't think we needed to. You weren't using it." And David agreed it made the space feel outdated. Outdated. I placed the photo frame gently back on the mantel, where it used to belong. My fingers lingered on the wood, feeling the groove George carved when he hung it. Emily noticed. "That photo's kind of dark, don't you think? Maybe we could put up something more cheerful." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My mouth was dry. My heartbeat thumped in my ears, not loud but steady. Steady like the ache of being dismissed. She breezed past me toward the kitchen, humming something under her breath. "Oh, by the way," she tossed over her shoulder. "David said you might want to clear out some of the hallway storage. He needs space for his gym stuff." I stared after her. My hallway. My house. My storage closet. Where I kept George's journals. Our wedding china. The letters. The letters he wrote me every year on our anniversary. I walked to the closet out of instinct. Opened it. Already half emptied. Boxes stacked against the wall. A plastic tub I didn't recognize filled with sneakers and weights. I knelt down. One of the boxes had been torn, paper spilling out. My hands trembled as I picked up the edge of an envelope. George's handwriting. My throat closed. Behind me I heard Emily's voice again, casual and cruel. "Oh, and those old papers? If they're not important, we'll probably shred them. Can't have all this junk taking up space." That word again. Junk. Memories as junk. I stood up slowly. My knees protested, but I ignored them. David was in the kitchen now, pouring cereal. He looked up as I entered. "Morning, Mom." "David." My voice cracked. I didn't mean it to. He looked tired. Or maybe guilty. It was hard to tell. He didn't come over. Just stood there holding the milk. "I didn't know about the chair," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You didn't stop it either," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked down. Emily thought it'd be good for the space. The space. Not our home. Not your house, Mom. Just the space. The silence that followed felt heavy. It settled between us like dust that no one wanted to clean. I turned away. Walked back toward the hallway. As I passed the living room, I noticed something under the sofa. I bent down slow, careful. My back didn't bend like it used to. It was the floral pillow. The one with the stitched heart in the center. George's favorite. Shoved underneath. Half crushed. Like it didn't belong anymore. That was the moment I realized they weren't living with me. They were living over me. I don't know what made me pause that morning. Maybe it was the stillness in the hallway. Maybe it was how Emily's voice dropped to a whisper the moment I stepped onto the stairs. I froze, one foot hovering over the next step. The door to the study was cracked just enough. Enough for voices to slip out. I said October. Emily's tone was clipped, impatient. It's already been too long. If we wait until the holidays, it'll look suspicious. My fingers curled around the stair rail. Just tell her it's about her health. Something gentle. Say the doctor recommended it. She laughed, a short, dry sound. She won't argue. She never does. I didn't hear David's voice. Only the rustling of paper, the clicking of a pen, and my own heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The study. My husband's study. George had loved that room. It smelled of cedar and tobacco even years after he passed. I hadn't changed it. Couldn't. His desk still held his pen holder. The window faced the garden. That room had been his thinking space, his pride. And now their plotting ground. I moved back slowly, careful not to let the floor creak. Downstairs, the quiet suddenly felt sinister. Like the walls had heard too much. I reached for the study door a few minutes later, after they'd both left. My hand hovered over the knob. Locked. It had never been locked before. Not even when George kept our tax papers inside. I jiggled it gently. Nothing. The brass handle was cold under my palm. The kind of cold that lingers even after you pull away. I leaned in. Sniffed. The faint smell of my own perfume. Lavender and bergamot. That bottle had been nearly full last week. It wasn't now. They were in my room. In my drawers. Wearing my scent. Plotting my future. I backed away, steadying myself against the wall. Everything felt off-center. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. The corners were too sharp, the silence too loud. Later that afternoon, I tried to talk to David. Not fight. Just talk. He was in the garage sorting old boxes. I cleared my throat. I noticed the study's locked. He didn't turn around. Yeah, just keeping some documents safe. From me. This time he faced me. Eyes tired, unsure. It's not like that, Mom. Then what's it like? He sighed. You're making it a bigger deal than it is. I heard you and Emily this morning. His jaw tightened. I stepped closer. You're planning to move me out, aren't you? Silence. That silence said everything. I just think it might be better for your health. He finally muttered. My voice rose without meaning to. Better for my health? Or more convenient for your life? Don't twist it. I held up my hand. Don't lie. He turned away. A familiar ache bloomed in my chest. Not the heart kind. The memory kind. I remembered holding him at 5 years old when he cried after scraping his knee. I remembered staying up all night for his high school science fair, helping him glue solar panels to cardboard. I remembered when he first got promoted, how he brought me flowers and said, I owe you for every step. And now he wouldn't even look me in the eye. That night I sat in the dark living room. The new furniture didn't creak like mine had. It sat silent and strange, as if trying to forget I'd ever existed here. I glanced at the photo frame on the mantel, George's face calm and steady. I whispered, they think I'm too old to notice. But I see it, George. They're getting ready to erase me. Outside, the wind picked up. The blinds tapped against the windows like fingers trying to get in. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat up with an old shawl wrapped around my shoulders, breathing in the scent of cedar that still clung to the baseboards. By morning, I had no appetite. But I had clarity. This wasn't careless neglect. This wasn't just rudeness or a bad week. It was something deliberate. Cold. They had a plan. They'd locked me out of the room where my husband's legacy lived. They were deciding where to place me, like an item too large for the shelf. It wasn't just unkindness. It was a plan. And I wasn't supposed to know yet. The invitation was sent without asking me. Emily claimed it was a small gathering, just a few friends to celebrate my birthday since I'd missed it the day before. I knew something was off the moment I stepped into the living room. The scent hit me first, not of cake or candles, but strong perfume and store-bought potpourri, like the kind they keep near the checkout lines. The room was full of people I didn't recognize, her friends. Laughing women in glittery tops, wine glasses in hand, music too loud for conversation. No one looked up when I walked in. No one said, "There she is." No one even clapped. I stood there for a second, clutching the armrest to steady myself. Emily turned and saw me. "Oh, you're up," she called out, waving like I was interrupting a movie. "Hope the noise didn't wake you." The women around her laughed, not kindly, just politely, like you do when you want someone to feel small. I smiled the way I've learned to over the years. Small, tight, dignified. David was near the dining table, holding a drink, talking to someone. He didn't come over. He just nodded at me, a quick tilt of the head, as if that was enough. I walked slowly to the table. The candles on the cake were already out. Half the frosting was smeared. A piece had been sliced unevenly, and there were fingerprints on the box. The plastic fork lay discarded beside it, used and bent. It looked like the party had already happened, without me. I touched the edge of the cake. It was cold. "Did you already do the candles?" I asked softly. Emily laughed. "We didn't know when you'd be up, Eleanor," she said. "Figured you'd appreciate the quiet more than the fuss." A few guests chuckled. One of the women whispered something about old folks and naps. Another said, "Well, at least she's up now." I swallowed hard. There was a time my birthday meant something. George used to get up before me and fry apples and cinnamon just to make the kitchen smell special. My son would climb into bed with a handmade card, grinning ear to ear. Now I stood beside a half-eaten cake, surrounded by strangers. "Would you like to say a few words?" Emily asked, raising her glass. I hesitated. "Don't worry," she said before I could answer. "Let's just toast to good health, and many more years, as long as they're peaceful ones." Laughter again. My hands tightened around the chair back. David raised his glass barely. He didn't even look at me. My heart twisted. One of the guests gestured toward the corner. "Hey, is that her wedding photo?" Emily followed the finger and shrugged. "Oh, that old thing? I keep meaning to put it away. It's outdated." They laughed again. Outdated. Just like me. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. Instead, I sat down in the nearest chair, folded my hands in my lap and smiled softly. My grandson Noah stood awkwardly in the doorway. He's only 9. He looked at me and then at his mother. His little eyes darted nervously. Then he came over and gently placed a napkin in my lap. That napkin broke me more than anything else in that room. After the guests had moved on to louder conversations, I stood and quietly slipped out onto the porch. The evening breeze was cooler than I expected. It brushed against my cheeks like a kind hand. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time someone celebrated me just because they wanted to. I heard the door open behind me. David. He sat beside me, silent for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "I don't know, for how tonight went." I nodded. "Do you remember?" I asked. "When you were 7, and you sang happy birthday with a paper crown on your head?" He smiled faintly. "I do. You said, 'Mommy, you're my queen forever.'" He looked down at his hands. "I didn't expect tonight to feel this way," he whispered. "I did," I said. And then I went inside. I didn't say good night. I didn't touch the cake. I went upstairs into my room. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears fall, not loud, not desperate, just quiet streams. The kind that feel like rain on windows that no one looks through anymore. What would you do if your daughter-in-law humiliated you like this on your birthday? Would you speak up? Or would you let silence hold your dignity? That was the night I cried quietly into a towel, with nobody knocking on my door to check. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat up in bed, the towel still damp in my lap, my chest aching in that slow, hollow way it does when disappointment comes dressed as acceptance. The house was silent, too silent for a birthday. The hallway light cast long shadows across my floor, stretching toward me like old memories begging to be seen. That's when I saw it. The broken teacup. It sat on the edge of my dresser, hairline crack running down the handle, the painted daisy chipped where it had hit the floor. Emily must have knocked it over during her decorating. No apology. No mention. I picked it up gently, held it in both hands. My fingers traced the line like I was reading an old scar. And just like that, I was somewhere else entirely. Not this cold room. Not this sad house. But 34 years ago. It was the middle of winter. David was 10. And burning up with fever. We lived in our old place back then, small with a heater that groaned louder than it worked. The walls were thin, and the wind used to whistle through the gaps like a song that wouldn't end. George had just left for a night shift at the factory. I sat by David's bed, a bowl of cold water and cloth beside me. His forehead was so hot I remember checking it twice, thinking the thermometer had broken. He was shivering under 2 blankets, cheeks flushed red, and yet he smiled when I placed a cool cloth on his head. "Thanks, Mama," he whispered, his voice so soft I almost missed it. "I'm right here," I said, stroking his hair. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, I stayed up with him till dawn, fed him sips of warm broth, rubbed his back when he coughed, read him the same bedtime story 4 times. The Little Engine That Could, his favorite. At one point around 3 a.m., I went to the kitchen and made myself tea. I remember everything about that moment. The kettle was old and loud, but the whistle made the kitchen feel alive. I just bought a new box of Earl Grey. Could barely afford it, but it was my little birthday gift to myself. I was turning 42 the next day. I poured the hot water into my brand new teacup, white with painted daisies. George had given it to me the week before, wrapped in newspaper with a little note inside that read, "To the strongest woman I know, happy early birthday." I remember sitting at the table, the steam rising into the frost-kissed air, my hands warming around that cup. And despite the exhaustion, I felt complete. David was asleep, breathing softly. George was working for us, and I had tea in my favorite cup. That was all I needed. I blinked. The memory faded like a film reel running out. I was back in my dim bedroom, the cracked teacup still in my hands. The same cup, but the warmth was gone. There was no steam now. No laughter from the next room. No George humming as he came home late, shaking snow off his coat. No David calling for me in that sweet boyish voice. Just silence. Just a chair that no one sat in. And a cup no one bothered to fix. I walked quietly into the hallway, my slippers whispering against the floorboards. The house smelled of Emily's hairspray. Sharp. Cold. Not like the cinnamon I used to boil on the stove in winter just to make the air feel soft. In the study's closed door I saw my reflection. And for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of age, but because of the ache in her eyes. The woman who once stayed up all night to comfort a sick child had been left alone on her birthday. I sat back down on the bed and placed the cracked cup gently on the nightstand. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I whispered into the quiet, "You were worth every second, David. Every ache. Every sleepless night." The words disappeared into the dark, like they always do. But I meant them. I always had. Love had been my strength then, but now it felt like my biggest weakness. The next morning I didn't make tea. I didn't put on music or hum while folding the laundry, or even open the curtains like I usually did to let the light in. I just waited. I sat at the dining table, hands folded, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. The rhythm felt like a countdown. And then she entered. Emily, hair freshly curled, phone in hand, still in her silk robe. She paused when she saw me. "Oh," she said, surprised. "You're up early." I didn't smile. "We need to talk." She blinked. "All right." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please." She hesitated just a beat too long, before pulling it out and sitting with a loud sigh like she was doing me a favor. "What's this about?" she asked, scrolling through her phone. I watched her. Really watched her. The way she sat, too comfortable. Like she owned the place. Like she belonged. I'd never noticed it so clearly before. I took a breath. "I want access to the study." She looked up, eyebrows raised. "What?" "The study," I repeated. "The door's been locked. I want it opened." She laughed, short-clipped. "Oh, Eleanor. It's just temporary. We're organizing some paperwork. You wouldn't even understand half of it." "I don't need to understand it," I said calmly. "It's my house. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. Her smile dropped a fraction. It's our house now, isn't it? No, I said, the word firm, heavier than I expected. No, Emily. It isn't. The air between us shifted. The clock ticked louder. Tick, tick. She leaned back. David said it was fine. And I didn't. Her laugh this time had no humor. You're being dramatic. I heard you, I said quietly. The conversation about moving me out. Telling me it's for my health. Locking rooms, changing furniture, discarding my things. Emily's eyes narrowed. You were eavesdropping? I live here, I said. I don't need to eavesdrop in my own home. You're being paranoid. My voice remained even. Then unlocked the door. She didn't answer. I let the silence do the work. Then she stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the wood. You're creating tension in this house for no reason, she snapped. David and I have been nothing but supportive. We've taken care of you, managed your bills, let you stay here when? When? I interrupted, my voice rising for the first time. Let me stay? Emily, this is my house. She scoffed. That's not how David sees it. My heart stung at that, but I didn't show it. I couldn't. I stood up slowly, bracing on the table's edge. My husband and I built this home from the ground up, I said. We chose every nail, every window, every rose in that garden. I held my child in these rooms, buried my husband with this roof still over us. You may walk through it now, but it does not belong to you. Her eyes flashed. Why do you always have to make everything about the past? Because the past is all I have left that hasn't been moved, repainted, or locked away. She turned to leave, but I wasn't done. Tell me, I asked, if the roles were reversed, if this was your mother's house, would you dare do the same? She paused, back stiff. Then she tossed the words over her shoulder like venom. If it were my mother, she'd have known when to step aside. That stopped me cold. There it was. Not even wrapped in politeness. She wanted me gone. Not in theory. Not in time. But now. As I stood there, chest tight, the words echoing in my head, David walked in. He froze. Took in the scene, Emily's back, my clenched fists, the heavy air. What's going on? He asked. I turned to him. Your wife just told me I should have stepped aside. He looked at Emily. She didn't deny it. She just crossed her arms and looked away. And David, my boy, my child, he said nothing. Not I'm sorry. Not she's wrong. Not even Mom. He just stood there. And I saw it. In his silence, I saw how much I'd lost. Not just space. Not just respect. But him. I looked at my son's face, and for the first time I couldn't recognize him. After that confrontation I stopped speaking. Not out of fear. Out of strategy. There's a difference. For days I moved like a shadow through my own house. Emily laughed louder. David worked later. And the silence between us thickened. They thought I was retreating. But I wasn't disappearing. I was watching. I was remembering. I was preparing. One morning I went into the attic. The stairs creaked beneath me. Every step groaning with history. Dust floated in the sunlight like snowflakes suspended in time. I hadn't been up there in years. I found the boxes I needed quickly. Labeled in George's handwriting, faded but firm. Legal documents. Property. Deeds. My fingers brushed over the edge of one envelope. Yellowed with age. Sealed with a small metal clip. I opened it carefully, as if it were made of glass. Inside were the original ownership papers for the house. But more importantly, a note from George. Handwritten. I recognized his pen strokes immediately, precise, steady. Eleanor, if anything ever feels wrong, if you're ever unsure, remember the power stays with you. I never changed the clause. You hold the final word. Clause. I hadn't thought about it in years. George had added a protection clause back when David was still a teenager. A line that granted me irrevocable authority over property decisions, no matter whose name eventually appeared alongside mine. It was one of the many ways he had protected me long after he was gone. My hands trembled slightly as I read the language. It was still valid. Still binding. Still mine. And no one, not even Emily with her cold perfume and sharper tongue, knew it existed. Not yet. The next day I called Thomas Weller. He was George's lawyer. Retired now, mostly gardening and volunteering at the local shelter. but sharp as ever. "Eleanor?" he said when he answered, his voice surprised. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard from you in what, 10 years? I smiled into the phone. "I need a favor, Tom. A quiet one." There was a pause. Then he chuckled. "You've got that tone in your voice. Just like George used to get before making a move no one saw coming. We met at the park. Neutral ground. Safe. I wore sunglasses, a scarf around my shoulders. The breeze was warm that day, the kind that smells like cut grass and blooming magnolias." He looked older, but his handshake was firm. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out a notepad. I handed him the clause. He read it twice, then looked up with a slow smile. "You're sitting on a landmine." "I want to use it," I said softly. "But only when it matters most." He nodded. "You will. And you'll win." Back home I was quieter than ever. At dinner, Emily passed me a plate without looking at me. David talked about a work promotion like I wasn't there. I listened to their plans, trips, remodeling ideas, nursery upgrades they never explained. They thought I didn't hear. But I did. I always did. One night, while they were out, I walked through every room and took photos on my old phone. Not for memories. For proof. Proof of what was mine. What they'd changed. What they tried to erase. In the kitchen drawer I found a receipt. Emily's name on a down payment to a real estate staging service. A date circled in ink. November 2nd. They were preparing to sell. Before the holidays. Before I could stop them. Except, they didn't know I already had. That evening I folded the birthday card, still unopened, and wrapped it in twine. I didn't know why. Just that it felt important to keep it close. Like a loose end I wasn't ready to cut. I placed it in the drawer beside George's watch. His old silver one, scratched and dependable, the one that ticked a little slower after he passed but never stopped. And then I sat down at the table. Not to drink tea. Not to weep. To plan. Some wounds don't bleed. They echo. That afternoon, I was dusting the hallway bookshelf when I heard David on the phone. He didn't know I was home early. Emily had taken the car, so he assumed the house was empty. I paused mid-swipe, the duster still in my hand, and stepped back into the shadow of the hallway. His voice floated from the kitchen. "No, she doesn't suspect anything, yeah. Yeah, we'll move forward after the appraisal." Appraisal. My hand gripped the edge of the wall. She's old. It's not like she's using the space. And once she's out, it's cleaner legally. Emily already talked to a guy who does clean transitions. Clean transitions. I felt the air leave my lungs like someone had punched me. There was a silence, then he laughed. A short, nervous chuckle. "I know it feels weird. But she's had a good run. She won't fight us." I didn't hear the rest. Not because he stopped talking, but because my ears started ringing. That sharp, thin hum that drowns out everything else. Like your body is trying to protect you from the words your heart can't handle. I slid down against the wall, the duster slipping from my hand onto the floor like it belonged to someone else. She's had a good run. Is that how my son saw me? A run? Like I was a car nearing retirement. A show nearing its final season? My own flesh. The boy I raised through fevers and nightmares. The boy I stayed up nights worrying over, the one I sat in school meetings for, defended, fed, clothed, protected. And now he was planning to remove me like an outdated appliance. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, the house went quiet again. The front door closed. David had left. And I was alone. I pulled myself up slowly, shakily, and walked to my room. I needed air. But more than that, I needed silence. Not the kind Emily creates with dismissive glances and closed doors. The kind I used to find in memories. I reached for the shoebox at the back of my closet. Inside were the old birthday cards. The real ones. David's crayon handwriting. Stick figures with halos. A poem he wrote when he was 12, rhyming best with rest. I ran my fingers over the bent corners. And one particular card caught my eye. It was from my 50th birthday. He had written, "No matter how tall I grow, I'll always need you to hold my hand. Love, your son forever." Forever. I clutched that card to my chest and leaned back on the bed, letting the weight of it all press down like an ocean wave. And in that moment, another memory surged. I was 36. David had just turned 7. He'd spent the week planning a surprise for me. hiding paper crowns in drawers, drawing hearts on sticky notes, even trying to bake cookies with George. The cookies had burned. The hearts had smudged. But when I walked into the living room that morning, there he stood, wearing a crooked crown, holding a tray with burnt cookies and a glass of juice. He beamed. "Happy birthday, Mama. You're my queen forever." George had taken a picture. It used to hang in the hallway. Emily must have boxed it. That day, David had climbed into my lap and whispered, "Promise you'll never leave me, even when I'm old." And I had said, "I won't. But when you're old, promise you won't leave me either." He'd nodded so earnestly. "Never ever." I opened my eyes. The bedroom was dark now. No balloons. No laughter. Just the soft hum of betrayal lingering in the air. And a question twisting in my chest. When did love turn into inconvenience? Would you forgive? Or finally walk away forever? If the child you gave everything to turned you into a burden, would you still stay silent? That's when I stopped crying. And started planning. The next morning I laid out the good china. The kind with gold trim and tiny blue flowers I only ever used when George's boss came to dinner, or when David graduated high school. It had been years since anyone in this house deserved it. But today wasn't about what they deserved. It was about what I was about to take back. I set the table in silence. No radio. No hum of morning chatter. Just the clink of porcelain and the distant sound of the neighbor's dog barking. The air smelled of lemon polish and something sharper, resolve. Emily came down first. She was in her usual silk robe, scrolling through her phone, only half awake. She paused when she saw the table. "What's this?" she asked, furrowing her brow. "Brunch." I smiled, slow and steady. "I thought we should sit down. As a family." She smirked. "Well, isn't that sweet? Is this for an occasion?" I shook my head. "No. Just timing." David came in behind her, already dressed for work, briefcase in hand. He stopped when he saw the table. "Everything okay?" I gestured. "Sit, both of you." They exchanged a glance. One of those private looks couples share when they're deciding how serious something is. How much to care. Eventually they did. I poured tea. Their favorite blend. Ginger peach for David, hibiscus mint for Emily. I remembered their preferences even if they forgot mine. I sat last, folding my hands in my lap. No one spoke for a moment. Then Emily leaned forward, trying to take control. "If this is about the study again." "It's not," I interrupted. She blinked. David looked confused. I reached into my pocket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. The paper was crisp. The seal marked with Thomas Weller's legal insignia. "This," I said gently, "is a formal notice." Emily reached for it without asking. David frowned. "Mom, what is this?" She scanned the letter. Her face changed. Eyes widened. The corners of her mouth twitched, not in a smile. In disbelief. "What is this?" she hissed. "A notice," I repeated, invoking the clause George left in the property agreement. The one giving me final legal authority. David leaned forward, stunned. "What clause?" I looked at him. "The one your father insisted on." For moments like this. He shook his head slowly, trying to keep up. "But what does it mean?" "It means," I said, my voice quiet but clear, "you have until tomorrow morning to vacate the house." Emily laughed. Not a real laugh. A sharp barking sound. "You can't do this." "I already have," I replied. She stood up, palms on the table. "This is our house." "No," I said. "This is my home. And I let you stay here out of love. But you mistook my kindness for weakness." David was silent. He looked like someone waking from anesthesia. "Mom," he said, barely above a whisper. "You're overreacting." I tilted my head. "Am I? You're kicking us out?" I looked at my son, the boy who once made me birthday cards and promised never to leave me. And I said, "No, I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference." Emily grabbed the envelope, crumpling it in her fist. "You won't get away with this." I stood. Slowly. No drama. Just presence. I already did. And I walked away. Left them at that table, tea growing cold. The same way mine had been the morning after my birthday. Later that day I packed a small bag. Not mine, hers. I folded her expensive sweaters. The one she ordered online with my address. I placed them in a suitcase she once told me she wouldn't be caught dead using. I zipped it with steady hands. Then I went to the hallway. I stood in front of the locked study door. And I smiled. She laughed. Until she saw the seal on the envelope. The next morning the house was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes with peace, but the kind that simmers beneath the surface. The kind you find before a storm breaks. Emily didn't speak to me when we crossed paths in the hallway. She brushed past me like I was furniture. Her perfume clung to the air long after she was gone. Vanilla and vinegar. David didn't come downstairs at all. I set the tea on the stove, letting it boil longer than usual, just to hear something other than my own heartbeat. Then I picked up the phone. Eleanor Marshall. Came the voice on the other end, warm and surprised. I haven't heard from you since George's funeral. Harriet, I said softly. I need your help. She was my neighbor 2 doors down. Retired nurse. Never had children of her own, but she treated every lost cat and lonely soul like family. When I explained what had happened, her voice dropped an octave. Say no more. I've seen them. I knew something wasn't right. What do you need from me? Just your eyes. Your words. In writing. You'll have it by noon. Next, I called the realtor Emily had contacted. He'd been by the house twice, eyeing the rooms, running his hand along the staircase banister like he already owned it. But what Emily didn't know was that George had worked with his father. And loyalty in small towns has a long memory. Pull the listing, I told him. He didn't hesitate. Already done. And Eleanor? Good for you. I moved through the house like a ghost with purpose. I cleaned the mantel, dusted the picture frames, returned George's photograph to the center, right where it belonged. Then I took down the cheap scented candles Emily had lined the shelves with, and replaced them with lavender sachets, my scent. My memory. I walked past the study and tapped the wood of the door. My door now. Locked or not, it would open soon. That evening I packed the rest of Emily's things. Neatly. Without pettiness. Sweaters, scarves, makeup, chargers. Even the silk robe she loved so much. I placed everything into the suitcase and set it by the front door. The birthday card, still unopened, rested on top. Wrapped in twine. A bow tied like a quiet apology she never gave me. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't say a word. Instead, I served them dinner with steady hands. Roast chicken, garlic potatoes, green beans with lemon. Everything David loved growing up. Neither of them touched it. Emily poked at her plate. David stared at his phone. No one spoke. But I watched their movements, their expressions, the flickers of nervous glances exchanged between them. They felt it. They didn't know what it was yet, but they knew the air had changed. That night I sat in the garden. The moon hung low, pale and watching. I held George's old watch in my hand. The silver was worn. The tick slower than it used to be. But it still worked. Just like me. The roses were blooming again. Despite everything. Despite the neglect. Despite the roots being shaken. They were blooming. The next morning I put on my best dress. Blue cotton. The one with pearl buttons. The one George always said made me look too pretty to be this tired. I tied my hair back. Applied a soft dab of rose powder. And I waited. For what? Not for them. For the truth. By sunrise she'd be gone. And I'd still be standing. I didn't make an announcement. No speeches. No warnings. I simply opened the front door, took a deep breath of morning air, and began moving her things outside. 1 suitcase. Then 2. Then her shoes. Then the coat she always bragged was designer. Even though the tag had said clearance. It was all lined up carefully, respectfully, right at the edge of the porch. Not dumped. Not tossed. Just removed. A boundary. A line drawn not in chalk but in dignity. The neighbors noticed first. Mrs. Langston peeked from behind her curtain, eyes narrowing. Mr. Price, the widower next door, paused mid-sprinkler test and stared. Harriet arrived a few minutes later, dressed in her nurse's scrubs even though she hadn't worked a shift in years. She stood beside me silently, a folded document in her hand. A sworn statement, witness to verbal abuse, manipulation, the slow erasure of my space. The sun climbed higher. The air warmed. And the front door creaked open behind me. Emily. She stood there barefoot, wrapped in her silk robe, mascara smudged from sleep. She looked at the suitcases, then at me, then at the small crowd gathering across the street. What is this? I didn't flinch. Your departure. Her laugh was breathless. You're kidding. No, I said. I've never been more serious. Her eyes darted around. David. He was already at the top of the stairs, half-dressed, wide-eyed, clearly caught between waking and dread. He didn't move. Emily stepped closer. You can't do this. This is our house. Incorrect, I replied, producing the folder Thomas had helped me prepare. Inside. A copy of the will clause, the revocation letter, notarized affidavits from Harriet and the realtor, and a formal notice of ownership restoration. Legally, morally, historically, I said calmly, this house is mine. She snatched the papers from my hand. Read the first few lines, then tore them in half. Trash, she snapped, her voice rising. This is trash. Harriet stepped forward, arms crossed. Funny. That's what you said about Eleanor's wedding photos. Emily turned to her. You have nothing to do with this. I've lived next door for 27 years, Harriet said. I've seen more than you think. And I've written all of it down. Emily's face flushed crimson. David finally descended the stairs. He looked at the suitcases. At me. Then at Emily. Maybe we should go, he said, barely above a whisper. Emily spun on him. Are you serious? After everything we've done? He didn't answer. Just rubbed his eyes and stepped outside slowly, like someone surrendering. You're pathetic, she snapped. He didn't defend himself. He didn't defend her. And he certainly didn't defend me, which was answer enough. I stepped back inside, not needing to see them leave. I didn't need the final insult or the door slam or the tires screeching down the road. I didn't crave revenge. I only wanted silence. True silence. The kind that doesn't ache. I sat at the kitchen table. The same one that had once hosted Sunday pancakes and science fair projects and birthday candles. Now it held only a warm mug of tea. Not fancy. Just mine. The scent of bergamot and honey drifted up to greet me. The kind George used to make when I had headaches. The door behind me opened one final time. A shuffle. Then a pause. David. He didn't say a word. Just placed something on the table beside me. The birthday card. Still sealed. Still blank. And then he walked away. Not a goodbye. Just away. I looked at the envelope. Held it gently. Still unopened. And I still hadn't opened my birthday card. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Not because I told anyone, but because people talk. And when a daughter-in-law gets evicted by a 74-year-old woman in pearls and soft shoes, well, people notice. The next afternoon, Thomas Weller arrived with final papers for me to sign. We sat on the porch, the same porch where my birthday cake had once sat soaking in the rain. Now it was dry. Clean. Mine again. Harriet joined us, armed with copies of her affidavit. I added the part where Emily said Eleanor was mentally declining. She told Thomas. Gaslighting is abuse. Let the court read it. He nodded. We're not going to court. But it's good to be ready. Harriet turned to me. Are you ready? I nodded. Not because I was brave. Because I was tired of being erased quietly. If they were going to try to remove me with whispers, I would respond with proof. That evening, a small group gathered outside. Not a mob. Not a crowd. Just witnesses. Neighbors. The realtor. Harriet. Even Mrs. Langston, who usually kept to her curtains, now stood outside watering her petunias a little too eagerly. Emily returned around 6. She thought no one would be there. She stepped out of a lift wearing sunglasses and a smug expression, like nothing had happened, until she saw them, until she saw me, standing on the porch, holding the manila folder. She froze. Don't do this, she muttered. Too late, I replied. I handed her the folder. Inside, every receipt, every listing, every email she had sent about cleaning up the property and moving the old lady somewhere safe. The realtor glanced down at the copies I'd sent him earlier. She told me she had full ownership, he said. That she was your power of attorney. She wasn't, I replied. She never was. Emily's eyes darted wildly. You people don't understand. This was our future. Our home. We were going to raise our family here. Then you should have treated it like a family, Harriet said, arms crossed. Instead of treating Eleanor like the clutter. Emily's mouth opened but nothing came out. David wasn't with her. I didn't ask where he was. Because it didn't matter anymore. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. Please, she hissed. Let's talk inside. We don't need to do this in front of. In front of what? I said. People who already heard you call me a burden? Who watched you host a birthday party without the birthday girl? Who watched you throw out a lifetime one decoration at a time? She backed up. They don't know the whole story, she muttered. They know enough, I said. And so do I. I walked back up the steps. Left her standing there, suitcase still scuffed from where I'd placed it the day before. The card was still tucked under the handle. Unopened. Unwanted. Just like me once. Tell me. Is family still family when they steal your dignity? If your own blood watched you disappear without saying a word, would you ever let them back in? I turned one last time. Emily was crying. But the tears didn't reach her voice. They never had. Inside, I poured a cup of tea. Set it on the windowsill. Watched as she got back in the car. Watched the neighborhood return to normal. Watched the sky darken just enough to remind me that storms always pass. Even if they linger too long. They left in silence. And I remained, not with victory, but with peace. The house is quiet again. But this time it doesn't feel empty. Feels mine. No sharp perfumes, no slammed doors, no low conversations in other rooms. Just the soft tick of George's old clock and the distant chirp of birds outside the window. I walk slowly through each room. Not to check. Not to clean. Just to remember. The hallway walls still hold the outline of old photo frames. I place them back one by one. George's fishing picture. David's graduation. Our 25th anniversary where I wore a dress that made my sister cry. I press the frames gently onto their hooks. Like I'm rehanging pieces of myself. In the kitchen, the curtains are open again. Light spills across the table where a fresh vase of roses sits. Yellow, George's favorite. No more unopened mail. No more harsh voices about wasting space. Just sunlight and silence. Real silence. The kind that holds space for healing. David didn't come back. Not that day. Not the next. But I saw him once standing across the street. No car. No suitcase. Just him. He didn't knock. He didn't wave. He looked at the house for a long time, then left. And somehow I understood that was his way of saying sorry without knowing how to say it out loud. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Some rifts can't be closed in a single conversation. Some wounds take longer than that. And that's all right. Because I wasn't standing on broken ground anymore. I was standing on my own again. That afternoon I sat in the garden with a warm cup of tea. Not the chipped cup Emily broke. A new one. Still simple. Still me. Steam rose from it in lazy curls. The smell of bergamot filled the air. And for the first time in weeks I took a full sip. Warm. Comforting. Mine. Noah came by just before sunset. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked up the porch steps, school bag still slung over one shoulder, and wrapped his arms around my waist. Tight. Desperate. Like he hadn't been allowed to in days. I stroked his hair. You okay? He nodded into my hip. Then he pulled back and asked, Are you still mad? I knelt so we were eye to eye. I'm not mad at you, I whispered. I never was. He looked at the birthday card still sitting on the side table. Can we open it now? He asked. I paused. Then nodded. He slid his little fingers under the flap, careful not to tear it. Inside was a generic printed message. No handwriting. No name. Just blank space. Noah looked up at me confused. I smiled and kissed the top of his head. It's okay, I said. Some words don't need to be written anymore. We folded the card closed and tucked it into the drawer beside George's watch. Together without another word. That night, I took one last walk through the house. Ran my hand along the walls. Felt the texture of the old paint, the warmth of years folded into the grain of the wood. I paused at the front door. Closed it gently. Turned the lock. Not to keep anyone out, but to remind myself. I could. Sometimes dignity isn't about winning. It's about remembering you were never meant to beg. It's about reclaiming the space you built with your own hands, breath by breath. And sometimes, the silence left behind is louder than any apology. Tell me, is it better to lose family or to lose yourself? Because sometimes they leave first, even if they never walk out the door. In losing them, I found me.